Hi, hello again. This is Jonathan Miller with Hometown Historian. I wanted to give a vlog update here because I haven't been able to post stuff for a couple days. And some of the videos I had talked about a little bit, the doctor update, my toe had got sort of messed up and had a doctor appointment, looked at that, and determined that it would be best if I stay off my feet for the most part till like Tuesday or Wednesday, which would have been yesterday. So I was a good little boy and actually was obedient and stuck by that as hard as it was to do, but put some work aside and some other stuff that I didn't do. But I had used all my backlogged videos, so I didn't really have much of anything for the last couple of days. But I wanted to give a little bit of a health update. Toe is fully healed. Still pretty gnarly looking, sort of gross, but they said that'll take a couple weeks before that starts to fully just shrink down and everything gets absorbed back in my body and it gets normal. But it's basically just, it's gross. I'm never going to be a foot model. Those days probably never were and definitely never will be. But I wanted to give you some ideas on some of the things that are going to be upcoming. I'm hoping this weekend that I'll be able to start filming again, and some of the ideas, some of the things. I want to do a video. If you're familiar with history, especially local history, something back in, it was 1878, it was called the Blue-Eyed Six, where they had taken out, it was the first case of insurance fraud in Pennsylvania, where they had taken out insurance, I guess it was assessment insurance is what it was called, it wasn't life insurance. They had taken out on this neighbor and ultimately got tired of him not dying and went out killing him. It's pretty freaking awful. But it was called the Blue-Eyed Six. It was worldwide. It was known, talked about. So it was one of those things that's actually a really intriguing thing. I was born, or I lived in Greenpoint, from the time I was born for about 25 years, and it's right down the road where Moonshine Church is. It's right behind there where the murder had happened. And so I've been doing a lot of research on that. So that's a video that's going to be coming up. I'm actually going to be able to take you, the site of the actual murder was at a tavern of the mastermind of the plot. He was one of the Blue-Eyed Six. That no longer exists, but it's right near what's called, I think it's St. Joseph's Springs, and it's on Indiantown Gap land, but those homes no longer, and that tavern no longer exists. They were all torn down, but we'll be able to get reasonably close to that. I also want to take you to Moonshine Cemetery where the victim is buried. Also then go a number of the other cemeteries in Greenpoint. I believe it's 3 of them are buried in cemeteries in the Greenpoint area. One is actually buried on private land because he was the murderer, and no cemetery would take a criminal like him. So his family actually buried him in the back garden, and but you can have access to that grave site. It's right off the road, right down from Moonshine Cemetery and Church. So we'll go visit that, and then the last 2 guys are buried in Mount Lebanon Cemetery in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. So we'll actually visit all those. I'm also going to do, Cliff and I had done when we did the Searching for History series for Lebanon, we had done Union Canal Tunnel Park. So we're actually going to visit that because I'm going to be doing a series on buildings or places that are on the National Registry of Historic Places, or even some of these places are on both that and historic landmarks. So I want to do a series on that. So there's a number of places that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to also, I did Beenagle Lutheran Church. I'm going to do Hill Lutheran Church in Cleona. It's right just north of Cleona. And also Sadison Lutheran Church out in Greenpoint, because that actually matches up with, because that's where 2 of the guys from the Blue-Eyed Six are buried. That's a church that's pretty old. The cool connection between the Beenagle Lutheran Church and these 2 churches is this Reverend Stover was apparently a traveling Lutheran minister, and I think his home church was supposed to be Beenagle, but he actually traveled, and he was the first pastor there at Sadison's Lutheran Church, as well as this Hill Lutheran Church just north of Cleona. And he actually died in the middle of one of these services, and it was just random. They didn't say what he died of, but he's actually buried in that cemetery. It's a really old cemetery place. It's very unique because there's a town that's, I think it's off of 72. It's called Heilmandale. The Heilman family was very prevalent in this area, and there are over 140 of them that are in the Heilman family that are buried in this cemetery. It's a really unique, and Reverend Stover is actually buried there. So I would like to find that because, he was all over the Lebanon Valley at these different Lutheran churches. Pretty cool guy actually. The other one I want to do is also Greenpoint, and it ties into Moonshine Church. I believe his name is Joseph Johns. He was an escaped slave, I believe from Virginia, and he actually, where Camp Bayshore Scout Reservation is, he had built like a small home there, and they had actually built a recreation of that home. But he is buried down in Moonshine Cemetery, so I would like to visit his grave. Plus, there's the marker, because he lived to like 116 years. He's a pretty cool guy. He was pretty influential in the community. He was a woodcutter, and the farmers he was a big help to the farmers. So that's a video I'd like to do. This one's a little further off. It's about the Coleman family. This was a family that was very, very influential in the Lebanon County area. They were very influential in Mount Gretna, Cornwall, all over the place. They're a very giving family as well. They were philanthropists and were really well known. In fact, one of the daughters, who actually died tragically, was going to marry President Buchanan, and she died tragically in an accident, which we'll go into that. But we're going to go to the different sites and things that had to deal with them directly. They have a number of memorial chapels that they paid for, and Coleman's Park there in Lebanon. It's a lot of really cool stuff. A very cool family. I'm going to start the series as well on the historical markers. I'm just going to start with Lindley Murray. We had done the Lindley Murray Schoolhouse. This guy I've done a lot of research on it. A really, really intriguing guy. It was like really world-renowned grammar and English historian, and there are books like after him that are considered some of the best books ever on grammar. Like, he was mentioned in Charles Dickens' books and Edgar Allan Poe. A lot of people knew who he was, and he had actually been born in Harper's Tavern, which is right down the road from me, and there's actually a road right out in this area that's named after him. But his family moved, I guess, down to North Carolina, and then his father was like a really successful businessman, moved him to Philadelphia, and then I think New York City. And eventually, once he got older and he had gone to school in New York City, he eventually moved to England, moved back, and then finally moved back to England. That's where he wound up passing away, over in England. But like really world-renowned grammar and English expert. And he wrote a lot of books on that type of stuff. I want to do another one, and these are on these historical markers, on a John Walter and a Jacob Albright. And these are actually two markers. John Walters is in Ono, Pennsylvania, and Jacob Albright is actually in a little town called Kleinfeldersville. And these are both like the places that they died. They're both buried. There's an Albright Memorial Chapel or church there where he's actually buried. And these guys were influential in starting the evangelical church. Part of it is the church across the street, the Evangelical Congregational Church. That was actually an offshoot. Most of the church of what they made eventually joined in several different parts into the United Methodist Church. But Albright College is actually named after Jacob Albright, and John Walter was very influential in the start. He was a very young man, actually died very young as well. Over in that area in there, Kleinfeldersville, I want to do the Schaefferstown Water Company. I know Cliff has done a bunch of videos on that, and there's a number of places over there in Schaefferstown. Very old town. I'd like to do a bunch of videos on, because I want to do this series on the historical buildings that are on this National Register of Historical Buildings and Places. So I want to also do one, a man that I've gotten to know pretty well and talking to several times. His name is Roger, and we've talked a lot off of Facebook Messenger mainly, and now we're emailing back and forth.
he's given me a lot of information. He had talked about a gentleman named James Lick, who is a California financier. He actually, I think they have a thing called the Lick Observatory that he donated out in California. But he was born, I believe, in Fredericksburg, so they actually have one of the cemeteries there. I guess a number of his family, maybe even him, are buried there. He's a really intriguing guy. That's another person I want to do a video on. Really interesting guy, very influential. The town of Lickdale is actually his namesake. Some of the historical buildings I want to go, which is called Baumberger's Distillery, was also known as Mitcher's Brewery. I'm not quite sure if this is still exists anymore, because I know there was a lot of the buildings got torn down out there because they had really just fallen apart. But it's a cool town. It's actually behind Schaeferstown, a little south of that. It's a neat area, but I figured that'd be something to try to check out. And then also the Schaefer House and the Brendel Farms, which it's like a whole thing there, like a homestead for the Schaefer, the guy that had actually founded Schaeferstown. And in that town there's also the Philip Arif House. I want to check that out. And the Rex House, which is a really neat place. And if it's open to there's a museum there, I'd like to film there. We'll see. I think you normally have to talk to them ahead of time to get something set up. But really, really, really old place. And it's one of those that has like sort of the clapboard siding. So it's even cooler that a place like that still exists. Because a lot of those places just fell into disrepair and just eventually got torn down. Also want to do one on Isaac Meyer Homestead. There's some pretty cool stories about him. He was the founder of Myerstown, where I lived for 15 years. He actually was murdered in one of the taverns, and as far as from what I remember, they never found the person that did it. But he was like an extraordinarily influential man in that area, but was killed and didn't live to his full potential because of that. And then I'd like to start some of this Country Roads Take Me Home series, maybe do 1 to 3 of those videos. So it's a lot, but over the next week I want to try to build up my filming backlog and start getting. So that's some of the stuff that's coming up. I just wanted to give you guys an update why there hasn't been anything on the channel. I said it a couple times, but it's just purely listening to doctor's orders, and we're heading in the right direction. The toe's healed, so the infection and that type of stuff should be a thing of the past, hopefully. And that's the main danger that I've been facing for a while is the threat of infection, and then that's where possibly have to go back to the hospital and get something else removed, which we don't want at all. So, but anyway, so I'm doing well. Thank you once again to all you for your support. This is just a quick vlog to let you know what's upcoming, and that hopefully over the next couple days, Saturday and Sunday, Monday and Tuesday, because it looks like I'm going to start working again Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and then doing little odd jobs for myself on and off, and we'll go from there. And thank you for coming along, and we will see you about town. Thanks, everybody.